Today is Friday, October 10th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. President Trump negotiates a historic peace deal. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can always email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me today to get through all the news of the day, CBN's Billy Hallowell and Tré Goins-Phillips. We have a lot to get to. As always, on the focus story, we've got someone from the ADF sounding the alarm about free speech.
Yep, he gets into all the issues we've seen over the last couple of years and a warning for America, so we'll break that down.
All right, details on that coming up in a minute. On the main thing, Tré, you got a story about somebody who has a remarkable story after suffering as a youngster horrific burns on 100% of his body.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible story. We actually had John O'Leary on the Faith and Culture podcast over the summer, so check that out if you haven't yet. And then this interview coming up is about the actors in the movie portraying his story. It's pretty powerful stuff.
All right, that's coming up in just a few minutes on the main thing. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to all of our podcasts that we have. You're going to love them. Their links are in the description of this podcast episode. We appreciate it if you go ahead and follow those as well and check those out each and every episode. Appreciate that. All right, we're going to head to the news now in 90 seconds. And President Trump says the hostages could start coming home as early as Monday or Tuesday as Israel and Hamas now sign on to phase one of a Gaza ceasefire, which includes a pause in fighting, staged IDF pullbacks, and a swap remaining Israeli hostages for some Palestinian prisoners. Israel's cabinet voted yesterday the ceasefire would begin within 24 hours of official approval and then a 72-hour window to start releases. The numbers: 48 hostages still to be returned. Israel believes about 20 are still alive. An international team is expected to help locate the deceased hostages. They're planning to head to Egypt for a formal signing. A possible Israel stop is in play. We saw celebrations after news of the deal spread in Tel Aviv and Gaza, but strikes continued yesterday pending the formal truce start. President Trump says tremendous things are coming in the Middle East as he prepares to travel after brokering that historic deal. The president told the New York Post he'll likely head to the region Sunday after announcing that first phase of the Gaza peace plan. That's the big story today. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And guys, I mean, this is just really remarkable. You have all these people that have been just vilifying and demonizing Trump. And for whatever you think about President Trump, he certainly has been good in these situations around the globe. And even the press, which is largely hostile towards him, has had to report this in at least a somewhat positive fashion, because this is what people have been calling for on both sides. They don't want the war to continue. And it looks like he's been able to broker this deal.
Yeah, well, and I think that there's so many factors at play here. I think Trump is very unpredictable, and his critics have said that that would be a dangerous thing. You know, oh, he's unpredictable. You don't know how he's going to behave. You don't know what's going to happen. He's unhinged. You hear all these critiques of him, but yet I think the effect of that is that other world leaders aren't sure how he's going to react, and so a lot of them fall in line. I think it's actually a strength when people aren't able to pinpoint what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And so that we've seen again and again. And let's not forget the Abraham Accords in the first term that he had. That was 4 nations forging a relationship with Israel. It was historic. Nations that, you know, were not necessarily on good terms with Israel. So to watch that happen and to then see this, and not just this, but the Iran-Israel war that he helped broker an end to as well as other conflicts, there's a pattern here that I think is undeniable, regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on.
Trump is kind of facing this right now from both sides, because I think you're 100% right, Dan. Generally speaking, the media is going to attack him no matter what, because it's Donald Trump. But I also think that with rising anti-Semitism on the left and on the right, and anti-Israel sentiment, I think Trump is also negotiating domestically just the political nature of all of this and how people are perceiving it. So I think having pulled this off on the global stage is, of course, impressive, and we'll see if it kind of bears out the way that he's forecasting that it will. But also, I think just the political nature of kind of walking that tightrope, because there are people on the right, people who were once, really deep into MAGA, who are now turning very hard against Israel, and we've covered that extensively here at CBN. So I think even just walking that balance has been impressive.
Yeah, and it's one of those traits where he is impervious to most criticisms, and so that helps him in situations like these because he's not worried about what this faction in his side is saying. He's just going to do what he thinks is the right thing, and so this time it ends up being, hopefully, if Hamas is following through to their word, which they're terrorists, you can only trust them as far as you can throw them. And so we'll see what happens. But if they're good to their word, then these hostages should be home very, very soon. All right, we're going to go to the focus story now. And Ryan Bangert, a senior counsel at Alliance of Defending Freedom, sounding the alarm about free speech. Tell me about what's going on here.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. We caught up with him, and he basically had a lot to say about what has been going on with free speech and censorship. And essentially, his argument is that the American left, and this is his perspective, has engaged in what he called blatant censorship and has been guilty of gross abuses of government power. He started going back to the Biden administration, talking about the fact that at the height of the COVID pandemic, the White House began to sort of privately lean on social media companies, including Meta and others, to take down messages that contradicted what the White House was saying about COVID. That included things about masks, vaccines, all the stay-at-home orders. And so he said that there was this concerted campaign within the White House to force off of social media those messages that they disagreed with, and really decreed these issues. He said that the fact that this was going on, this inappropriate censorship, it was something that really couldn't be ignored, and that we have seen an effort to engage in that overt censorship, really targeting and these are the words we all remember, right? Disinformation, misinformation, malformation. These are things that, were sort of slapped on any topic that, didn't line up with what the government was saying. And so, his argument was that this was unhealthy, it was wrong, and that it's a broader issue that needs to be kept in mind as we forge on as a country here.
And what was his specific concern about the current political dynamic that's going on?
So one of the things, obviously, right now, we have a new administration. People are excited. You've seen Facebook. Meta turned the corner earlier this year saying they were going to work to not restrict free speech, and all of that is great. But he said, even though this opportunity is happening, where freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, freedom of speech is sort of, out there, and we're seeing more of it, that we need to be very, very careful because, censorship isn't going anywhere. He said, if you look around the globe, it's on the rise in some places. And so he said, global censorship is still a real threat. And it's a growing problem around the world. It's not going to be ended or defeated simply by a couple of executive orders. And so his point is that we need to be diligent, that where we are right now, even though there's positive steps, is not actually going to shield us just because somebody in office right now is putting some executive orders in from the broader issue of free speech restrictions.
Are there any other issues that he raised as far as beyond our borders and globally?
Yeah, he talked quite a bit about the fact that people are being arrested for silently praying. We've covered these stories outside of abortion clinics in the UK. We talked a little bit about Pavi Räsänen in Finland, who's facing a legal battle and was facing potential jail time for sharing Bible verses that promote biblical marriage. These are things that are far worse than what's happening in America, and they are happening in other countries right now. And so he said, don't say it can't happen here. And even though we're seeing a new wind blowing here in the US, there's always that risk. Things could revert back, so we've got to be vigilant.
Yeah, this is one of those issues. It always was assumed, at least when I was growing up, that free speech was going to be something it's the First Amendment for a reason, right? It's the one that you assume is the bedrock of all the other ones. But it seems lately that people are pressing the limits on that. I mean, we've covered on this podcast many, many stories where the ADF and other organizations have to go and protect people's right to say what they believe and the things they believe. And so obviously incitement, there's things like that there are some limits to what you can do. But for the most part, speech is protected. And it seems like you've got a lot of growing factions now in the country who want to restrict speech in certain different ways. And they're pushing that and trying to force people into the courts in order to defend their rights. And it's a troubling trend.
Yeah, well, I think, free speech is a constitutional cornerstone of the American way, so it's important to protect it. But I think it's also, as important as it is, it's also equally as fragile. I think it's easy to kind of woo people over on both sides of the aisle, by the way, into, well, actually, okay, I might be okay with that restriction. And then the next party comes into power, and then all of a sudden you're the one whose speech is being suppressed. I mean, I think even last month with Pam Bondi making statements about, if I hear hate speech from you, we'll target you. Of course, she was kind of roundly criticized by her fellow conservatives for that and walked some of that back. But my point being is not to go after Pam Bondi, but just to say that there is that temptation there. And sometimes it's righteously motivated, right? You see something evil and terrible like the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and you want to do whatever you can to bar people from saying abhorrent things. But as people who value the right to free speech, you have to remember, okay, the antidote to bad speech is better speech, not to restrict somebody's right to say it.
Yeah, absolutely. Billy, final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, this is the real test, right? Do you really defend the First Amendment when it's an idea you don't like? And we have to be very careful with that, because you don't want emotions to overtake the rights that we're guaranteed, even if we don't like what the person's saying. So we got to be super careful with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, important story, and glad you brought it to the podcast today. And we are going to go to the main thing now. And John O'Leary suffered horrific burns on 100% of his body at just the age of 9 years old. And now there's a movie out about his incredible story. And Trey spoke with two of the stars from that, Macy McLean, Joel Courtney. The movie's called Soul on Fire. That conversation is today's main thing.
Something that I think is so profound about John's story is it's just through and through miraculous, right? There's no way really around the fact that his story, what happened to him, his recovery, and the life that he's led since is a miracle. And I know you playing his wife as somebody who kind of came alongside and saw it sort of from the outside, but then of course on the inside as his wife, experiencing all that alongside with him. So talk about just what can miracles teach us? What has this story taught you in your own life?
Ooh, what can miracles teach us? I think miracles can teach us that nothing is impossible with God. Yeah. Man, I think it's the power of prayer. I think sometimes, man, I'm guilty of this. Even this makes me think when I say I'm going to pray for somebody or all I can do is pray, that makes it sound like it's the least important thing I can do and not significant. And actually it is the most significant and most important and most effective thing you can do, because God is a God of miracles. And I think John's life is a testament of that. And I hope people leave the theater inspired that God can do anything. And he can do anything with anyone's life. He took a 9-year-old kid that went through the most horrific thing. And John now inspires millions of people, and his whole life is a miracle.
Joel, I think right now in the United States, really around the world, but certainly here at home, we're seeing just a resurgence of interest in the church and in Christianity and things of God. And I know very often it's movies like this. I know you were in Jesus Revolution, of course, and it's films like that and like this one that may be the thing that God uses to prompt them to explore faith a little bit more, or to explore prayer, as you were saying, Maisie. And what do you make of that? Just could you speak to the fact that often it's these touch points that are what reinvigorates somebody's spiritual walk?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think that this kind of a film can really speak to people into their hearts in a way that Tron absolutely cannot. So go see our film and not Tron. October 10th, go see our movie. This film can change your life. This film can open your eyes. This film can encourage you to do more. This film can teach you selflessness from Jack Buck, can teach you love from a parent to a son. It can it can encourage you. And I know that there's a resurgence to faith in, I think, the Gen Z like male world.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this film is aptly timed. And I think that it could really, help people kind of take another step towards love, a step towards faith, towards Christ, and a step towards their purpose.
Yeah. Maisie, in bringing the O'Leary family story to life and to the screen, what was a scene that you shot that was maybe mostly impactful to you, or maybe just the most fun to shoot?
Most fun to shoot would probably be one of them was the bowling alley scene. Yeah. And I say that because this person over here got like 3 strikes in a row when we weren't rolling, and the director was like, stop, but there was just, when it's group scenes, you just all have so much fun together. Everybody loves each other, and it's just like a big summer camp kind of feeling. And then one of the most impactful scenes to me is when Beth and John, they're in the dorm room and she's just doing physical therapy on him. And afterwards, they're having a really vulnerable conversation. And it's the first time really that John is being vulnerable with her and letting her into his insecurities. And I love, for me, portraying Beth, I just love how Beth is a safe place to land. She's just there. She's not running. She's not going anywhere. There's zero judgment. There's zero shame. I just think she is the safe place of what it looks like to land and to be loved and to be fully seen in all those insecurities. And then someone saying, even with all you've told me and all you're feeling, I choose you. And that was really powerful to me. I felt like that scene reflects that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Joel, Courtney, Maisie McLean, the movie is Soul on Fire. It hits theaters October 10th. Like Joel said, go see that. Don't see Tron. What even is Tron? But guys, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, Trey, appreciate that conversation there. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
We've got John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. If we're looking for full and abundant life, we can only find that in Jesus.
Yeah, I think we live with a binary, right? There's evil and darkness, and that stands against truth and the gospel. So good reminder there with that verse.
Absolutely, and a good spot to leave it here for the week on the Quick Start Podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Share the podcast with a friend if you enjoy being here with us each and every weekday bright and early. Share it with a friend. Let them know. We'd appreciate that. And we appreciate you being here with us, and Lord willing, and that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here on Monday with more. Have a fantastic weekend.